Okay, so today on the Spotted Painter we're going to cover gap filling. So sometimes when you have a model that's been assembled in multiple pieces, the manufacturer or even you yourself sometimes, you just can't get a good tight seal on something. You might have a gap between two pieces. So you've got to kind of do something. If you want to do anything more than just a real basic tabletop job, you're going to have to fill that gap. So what we're going to do is we're going to take just a little bit, we're going to cover two different methods rather. We're going to cover Apoxy Sculpt, which is a two-part epoxy that is water soluble, so it smooths real nice. We'll cover that. And then we're going to cover UV Resin, which is Bondic is a brand name of this. So it's a liquid, slightly thicker than most water, but less thick than a gel glue, I would say. So it'll self-level a little bit. We'll cover that. So if you've got big gaps though, you're going to want something like Apoxy Sculpt. What you're going to need to do is pinch off a little section from each tub. So there's one tub here, and there's one tub here. It's a two-part. So pinch off you don't need very much usually. This is probably too much. So you've got one from each part, right like that. And we're just going to start smushing them together. Okay, so we roll it together, we make sure that it's nice and smushed up. And we're going to shove it in that little crack, and then we're going to get it nice and smooth. Okay. So now we've got it pretty much rolled together. We're going to get even a little bit less. Alright, so now we got this. We got just a little bit there. We're going to kind of roll it out until it's aligned like that. Okay. Then we got this tool. This is a special tool for gap filling by Squadron products, I believe is their name. I'll put a link down in the video here. So but all we're going to do is we're just going to use this tool here to shove some in this gap here. And we're just going to push that down. It's got a nice little, see how it creates that? Yeah, it's got that little angle on the tool that allows us to shove it down in that gap pretty easily. If you don't have one of these, you can try it with a hobby knife, try it with a toothpick, just anything that'll get it down in there. And I'm not being real careful here. To get some more of the product here, we'll just leave it up here. Like that. We'll just put some up. It's not going to stay there. Okay. And we're just going to shove it down in there. The reality is, guys, this does not take long. This is pretty easy to do here. Okay. So we're going to kind of scrape away any of the excess. It's real obvious. Make sure it's all down in there. Alrighty. So we've got that in there. Now, here's the catch. Since this is water soluble, if we want to smooth it, all we do is we take a wet brush. Doesn't need to be too wet, but damp. And all we got to do is start brushing this. It needs to be a fairly stiff brush. Don't be afraid to use your finger a little bit. And all we're going to do is just brush that. And then, if you look, that is going completely smooth. And that will blend in however you need to. Now, if you've got texture on something, you might want to take a toothpick or a knife or something and kind of recreate a little bit of texture. So, we've got this texture in here, so maybe we're going to take and kind of, yeah, there we go. Just to make it so that it's not quite so obvious. Look at that. There we go. And so now that gap is filled. Now what if we don't have such a big gap? What about this gap up here on top? We got this one right here that's not quite that big. If that was the only gap and we didn't already have the putty out, this would be a good choice for Bondic. This is a one-part UV resin. So it's got a little applicator pen and it comes out in kind of a thick gel here, or a thin gel I would say. And all you do is you just squirt a little bit on there. Okay. Can you see how it's a little wet there? Looks a little, yeah. It's catching the light just right there. So, but there's a little there. And we're just going to put some there. And we're going to leave it set for a moment. You don't want to let this go right away. It'll self-level a little bit and sink into where it needs to sink into if you give it a moment. Okay, and then we're going to take our toothpick here and we're just going to spread it around. Make sure that there's no real bubbles or blobs or anything else. You can mess with this as long as you want until you take this special little light here and you hit it with the UV light. Okay? And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is set. Okay, so now at that point you can't do anything else with it. Let's take a little bit of primer here. This is gray Stynyirez primer, which is like my favorite stuff in the world for primer. Okay, we just put a little bit in a container there, and we're just going to brush a little bit on, see what it looks like here. You can brush, you can prime the epoxy sculpt when wet. And the nice thing about UV resin is that it dries as soon as we put that on, so it's ready to go. And you can see now that this gap that we had up here, that sucker's gone. And look at that. That guy's gone too. Now we took away some of the texture we added in because of our brush stroke. So maybe we'll just add just a little bit back in. There we go. So it's not quite so obvious. We'll put a little line here, something here. There we go. And you can see, guys, that, you know, it's not very hard, and really there's not much to it. So don't be afraid to fill those gaps, and just take the few minutes to make your models look great starting out.